All right, welcome in another Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive. I'm your host, Eytan Shander. You can follow me on Twitter at Shander Show. 14 games tonight to look at. That is a gigantic slate. That means 28 pitchers, 28 different stacks. And of course, that's Alex Baker. Mr. Awesemo himself at Awesemo Dfs is how you can follow along with Alex. And man, you talk about just a gigantic slate in its own right, just to overview everything. First and foremost, boss, it's a pleasure and honor to be on with you for the first time for me. And what a night. It's like we have so much content. I don't even know how much time we're going to get to chat about anything else.
What's up, Eytan? I'm going to do a show with you here. Got a 14-game slate. That's pretty awesome. They always say more games, more money, and the properties suggest also more problems. So we'll have to make some good calls here, so people get the money.
Now, you say we, but I think a lot of people here, I hate to break it to you, are coming for this show for you. So we'll get into that. Tonight's program, of course, the show, the Deeper Dive here, brought to you by No House Advantage. Before we do anything, we want to remind you, as we will continue to remind you throughout the show tonight, to like, to subscribe, to share. You want to make sure that you hit that notification bell so you never miss anything. You want to make sure you're subscribed to everything that we do so that you never miss a second of what's happening, especially if Alex is on giving you some information ahead of tonight's lineups, what you need to do as far as pitchers are concerned. You just never want to miss anything. So stay tuned, stay locked in with everything here happening with Awesemo, awesemo.com. Just like, subscribe, and hang around. So as always, right, we begin with the pitchers tonight. I mean, it's just jammed. We have a couple of names right there at the top. Snell as far as the most expensive, if you look at on Draftkings, but I don't know, Alex, necessarily if he's going to provide the biggest reward. How do you look at knowing we have 14 games, 28 pitchers to start with right there at the top?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because even though we have 14 games, about it looks like more than half the ownership is going to four guys at pitcher. And that's not a big surprise because on DraftKings, they do price these guys a little bit low at the top. But the highest priced guy being Snell is a little bit of a surprise at 10.2K facing San Francisco. I was about to say the 49ers. I don't know why that came in my head, but the Giants, they've struggled for a while. They don't have very much power, and their projected lineup has a good amount of strikeouts. So I think this could be a good spot. Plus, you got that West Coast weather. So I don't think Snell's a bad option, but he has a 31% strikeout rate this year. But that's pretty much in line with where it has been the previous years. But I'm a little bit worried that he's regressing a little bit in his skill level, even though the results have been the same. Because when we go into the swinging strike rate, 2 years ago for Tampa, it was 17.7%. Last year was 15%. This year is down to 13%. So one thing I've been thinking a lot about recently has been the pitching substances. And I feel like the pitchers for Tampa, it doesn't get quite the same hype as Houston. But I feel like something weird goes on in Tampa, and now that he's not on the Rays, I'm a little bit less trusting of him. So what's your general take on all the pitching substances?
So is it something in the water, basically? You leave town and then all of a sudden, can you import that? Is there anything that is local, right, to Tampa?
Well, no, I was watching this documentary, and they were saying that these teams have whole research and development of the substances, kind of like pine tar, but you see the pitchers kind of touch their arm a little bit before they pitch. And apparently, I mean, it's every single pitcher is using this stuff, and that's why the strikeout rates have been increasing. So
I'm sorry. Is this like a Patriots thing where they're just pushing every single envelope until they get caught?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I'd be interested what you guys think in the chat of this, because
Absolutely.
it sounds like I'm pushing some sort of like conspiracy theory now, but like this is something I've like obviously observed where like you take a picture and you just drop them into Houston and all of a sudden they're just like ace caliber. Now, Tampa also has seen guys have really good career arcs. So
So
I'm
you're
kind
telling me that I could take Vince Velasquez here up in Philly and I could drop him in Tampa and he's an ace or at least a number 2.
I mean, Vince Velasquez would be a prime example. That guy's like a flamethrower. Like he
Right.
strikes out 30% of guys. So add a little bit of spin rate, and maybe he'd be in business.
I love it. Now, as far as I'm just looking at your projections here, and I wonder if just the cash, you mentioned you were a little surprised about Snell at 10-2 on DraftKings. You've got 4 guys higher than him on the projections. And I just wonder if it's simply too much. Granted, I get what you have on the return if in fact Snell comes out and dominates and he can live up to that tag. But is it just simply too much based on your own projections when you see maybe a cheaper option, not necessarily instead of Snell, Alex, but more so if you're looking at maybe a cheaper 1 and then throwing a better 2 up there?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that if Snell is the 4th projected pitcher or 5th, and the other guys are cheaper as well, that does make less of an incentive to go to Snell. So I feel like I'm going to be under the field a little bit. And I mean, there's other really great pitchers on today's slate. So the knock against Snell too has been always he just doesn't go as deep into games as other aces. And I know he had a year where he should have won the Cy Young. I think he didn't, but um, he's averaged about 88 pitches per start, which at 10.2, you're really hoping to get 100 pitches, and I don't think that's very likely for Snell.
I mean, we start looking at a couple of other guys just from a price standpoint right there at the top. If you look at maybe somebody else right there and really looking on DraftKings, looks like there's 6 guys in that range. If you want to add Zach Gallen at 8,900, that's fine. But is there a P1 per se, Alex, that is a better option for your bang for your buck, even if you're spending just a couple of $100 less, let's say, on the site?
I think the number 1 guy I'm looking at is Trevor Rogers. Now, this is a name that I don't think people are super familiar with yet because he's super young. I think he's like 23 or 24. And you expect pitchers at that age to be improving. And the numbers have shown improvement over last year where he pitched a few games. So I'm pulling up Trevor Rogers on Fangraphs, get a little bit more information here.
He's got 6 innings or 5 innings at least, right? In at least 5 innings in all of his last 5 starts.
Yeah, and the lowest strikeout number he totaled in the last 6 games was 6 strikeouts, which is interesting. This guy wasn't like a huge prospect. They ranked him 104th out of the whole 2021 rookies, which isn't very inspiring. But he had a 30% K rate last year. It's up to 33% this year. That's outstanding. And he's got the swinging strikes to back it up at 16%. Up from last year at 13%. So we got some reason to believe that this isn't a fluke. His stuff, he throws a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. That's not like crazy fast, but it's certainly enough to get the job done. And then we look at the matchup. Milwaukee is a team that normally like is pretty tough, but you take Christian Yelich out of the lineup, looks a lot worse.
I just saw that up close here with the sweep against the Phils. They are night and day different, right? You take Yelich out.
Definitely. Yeah. Their lineup's looking pretty bad, like below league average in power, above league average in strikeouts. So, I mean, I feel like this matchup, especially given that it's in the Marlins Stadium, which is inside, so it's more of a pitcher's park. I find Rogers a little bit hard to get away from tonight.
As we remind you, make sure you continue, like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment of what's going on here. Awesemo Plus as well, our free premium tools today, our MLB player rankings. So make sure you're taking full advantage of that, because you can get access to everything here on Awesemo Plus, the tools, nearly every DFS sport out there. Awesemo Plus weekly is just $29.95. And remember, the MLB player rankings are a free tool for you today. And normally you get access to everything, the premium content, all the tools on awesemo.com. You get inside the mind of Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Do you know how rare of an opportunity that is to allow to go inside the mind of Alex, right? I mean, that in its own right is $29.95. That in its own right is your money back.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it.
It's true. Look, you build up the resume. So if you're just looking to play MLB DFS, don't worry. You can sign up now for our Awesemo Plus MLB weekly package. It's only $15.95, but really $29.95 for everything that you see here and get, and all of the premium tools, from the stack tool that we'll get to and continue to look at projections here with the pitchers. Awesemo Plus, $29.95. And again, from anything that we offer on the Awesemo site to just insight right here from Alex that you'll continue to get. Is there, I'm looking at this Dodgers game, and at 9,700 for Urias, as far as what he's been able to do recently, I wonder if you mentioned Rogers. I wonder if there's a play there, knowing that he's going to be more expensive at 9,700, but just looking 2 of the last 3 starts, if he can get into that 7th inning, this is a guy that's going to pay off.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Urias. He's coming off a 3-game stretch where he had 210+ strikeout outings. So, I mean, his stuff this year, it has been a lot better, because, this is a guy that he came into the league super young at 19. I think people expected him to be a lot better than he turned out to be. But it looks like this year he's kind of found his groove. 29% strikeout rate. That's been accompanied by the swinging strike rate increasing. Velocity is about the same at 94. So I think Urias is kind of like reaching some of his untapped potential now. But the big downside for Urias today, or Urias, I keep mispronouncing this guy's name.
It's fine. It is a little bit of that, like Aureus almost, right? But it's
Urias,
like you want to say Urias.
Yeah, I'm such a non-Spanish speaker. Okay, so the big knock against him, like the big news yesterday, the Angels released Albert Pujols,
right?
Which long overdue at this point. That guy hasn't posted above average. Like he's been worse than replacement level over the past 5 years. Like it's been ridiculous. But the Angels lineup, they just don't strike out a lot. It's about 15% less than your average team with their projected lineup. And they got some good power hitters, obviously, with Ohtani and Trout in particular. So with other guys cheaper and with better matchups, I find it difficult to get to Urias today.
All right. And I wonder, because, we mentioned Snell, we mentioned Urias, right? And your guy in Rogers, who I see is pretty low ownership so far, right, on the slate tonight, which, again, can only help your cause at this point, right?
Definitely.
Now, is there another name when we look at, like, because again, we're looking at price, right? Jack Flaherty at 9,400, Eduardo Rodriguez at 9,000. I mean, maybe we go back to that White Sox Royals game. I don't know. Just looking at these top pitchers based off of salary, and then combining it really with your own projections on tonight. Flaherty, for example, is your second highest projected pitcher at 9,400. So now you've got 3 guys ahead of him. Is that becoming appealing just based off projection, knowing that you're not spending the most for a P1 in Flaherty?
Flaherty, he is the most popular pitcher tonight, we're expecting. And there's a lot of good reason. I mean, he's going up against Colorado. The Rockies this year just like they're not it, you know. I guess is what the young kids would say. So their stats look a little bit beefed up because they play half their games in cores, but overall, like their lineup is just like miserable. So anytime you get to pick a pitcher against them away from cores, you're in business. Now the part where I think he might be a little bit overrated at Flaherty is St. Louis is a 2-1 favorite in this game.
Yep.
Which is really great. But Flaherty's strikeout stuff just isn't as good as some of the other pitchers on the slate. So he has a 26% strikeout rate this year, and 30% last year. But his numbers in the peripherals have kind of fallen to accompany that dip in strikeout rates. So the velocity is down a tiny bit, and the swinging strike rate is down like 3%. So that's a significant change. And that's important because we get about as 4 times as many pitches as at bats. So you get a little bit more of a sample size. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I apologize. I was going to ask something, but that was interesting. Just where you were going as far as the rate of pitches versus at bats and how much that could mitigate choosing a pitcher.
Yeah, like essentially, like at this point in the season, he's faced 139 batters, so that's a good amount. Like we can learn a lot from his 26% strikeout rate so far, being a little bit better than average in the league, and his numbers kind of back that up. That I feel like he's a slightly better than average pitcher in a great matchup.
Any thoughts on Rodriguez, just looking at a 9,000 price and looking as well at where you have him projected? Definitely not in that top slate. I mean, Snell, for example, is higher projected at 9,700, or pardon me, at 9,000. I imagine that's going to be a guy that we've already seen you mention in that typical fashion of, hey, stay away because it's not worth your bang here for your buck.
Yeah, I mean, Rodriguez is always interesting, like because his pitching style is so much different than other pitchers in the league. And he has good numbers so far this year, 28% K rate, which he didn't play last year, so we don't have a lot of recent data on him, but that shows he's pretty good. He's got a nice matchup versus the Orioles, who another weak team. But I do feel like the price of 9K is a little bit outpacing what we expect from Rodriguez because he's a guy that just doesn't go super deep in games either. He's averaged about 22 at-bats per start. So a little bit short of what we like from that price range.
Yeah, decently labeled total there, I see, right? 8.5 in Baltimore tonight. So maybe not as low as you would like anyway in that regard, looking at a guy, and what you're expecting would be a little counter to what you laid out, which would be a problem for Rodriguez. Then you look at maybe an 8.5 total and think, this might not be the night in which that would pay off. Understandable.
Yeah. I mean, he's I think the park is a factor here where Camden Yards is a batter's park. So and the other thing, like this is kind of surprising me a little bit, is the Orioles lineup. I do have them projected to strike out less than average. There just aren't any high K guys in their projected lineup, so maybe not as good a matchup as we would have anticipated.
Yeah, you have them. I know we'll get a little deeper in the stacks, but you have them pretty low on your stack projection, at least tonight here, for the percentage of it. So right now we have Rogers locked in as your number one pitcher. Is that right? To move on to a little deeper, mining some little deeper talent with the arms?
Definitely.
Okay. I just want to make sure, right? As people are building lineups, listening to the insight and kind of where we're going here. So now as we get to your second pitcher, on just looking at this from a bigger picture standpoint, is there a mentality here, knowing that you've got a larger slate here, 14 games, to where you don't necessarily have to go cheaper and you can spend a little more for a P2 in this case, knowing that you can make it up on the back end with a stack?
Definitely. Yeah. Especially because my SP1 of choice, Rogers, is only 8,800. So that does kind of open up anyone as SP2. One guy we haven't talked about yet is Charlie Morton.
Yep.
He obviously has been a good strikeout pitcher for a while. 28% K rate this year. He's going up against Philadelphia. And their lineup isn't bad, but they do strike out about league average. So the main thing I'm just seeing here is the price of Morton is a lot lower than talent level, where 7,700 for a guy that has a 28% strikeout rate is pretty good. And then the sports books only have Philadelphia projected for 3.8 runs. So,
yeah, I would go under. I don't think Bryce is going to play tonight, right? I mean, he was just barely moving his wrist around. Doesn't mean he won't play in the series, but I don't know if I'd expect that. And then JT was off yesterday, so he'll probably be back in. But it's not it wouldn't be enough for me without Harper to counter going against Morton. So without Harper, I like the Morton play even better.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's a good insight. Is if Harper is out of the lineup, which it sounds like there's a reason to believe he will be, then that makes the Morton matchup even better.
Yeah, man, you talk about coming off of a sweep against the Brewers, and then you have to face this guy. And I know you said the numbers are there about league average, but this feels like one of those games where a team that normally strikes out on league average against a pitcher, a guy likes to throw and will throw for strikes. I could see Morton dominating tonight. Definitely seeing that. And that's coming from a guy watching the Phillies.
And the fact that the weather in Atlanta is only 66 degrees tonight, and it's going to be even a little bit lower at game time. I do feel like that's unusually cold for Atlanta.
Interesting. How about the guy on the other side of it? He's clearly been a surprise when you look at him overall. The biggest thing I could take away from Zach Eflin is he doesn't walk anybody. And that's really special, especially something that you can rely on night in and night, start in and start out. Is there any appeal? You mentioned the weather, and you mentioned how basically with Morton, there's a clear advantage here. Is there any appeal with Zach Eflin as a P2?
Well, Eflin has been kind of intriguing because he had really good strikeout stuff last year. It came out of nowhere. He was at 28% last year. His previous year was only 18%. So that's where we kind of want to dig in a little bit into the peripherals. It looks like I remember at the time people were talking about how fluky his strikeout numbers were last year. And this year it does look like his velocity is down a lot. Down from 94.5 miles per hour fastball to 93.3. So over a mile per hour down. And his strikeout numbers have gone down as well. So that makes me think that he's a lot closer to that 22% that he's posted this year than a 28% last year. And Atlanta's a really tough matchup. They got some of the best hitters in the league, like Acuna and Freeman. So I think there are some big question marks with Eflin.
Yeah, at 8,600 just seems like it would. Is he just overpriced because of the success, the recent success he's had? Maybe not from even a fantasy standpoint, but just overall?
He's definitely overpriced because I think he's coming off a good game where he had 7 strikeouts. The game before that, 8 strikeouts. So the thing is, it hasn't been consistent this year. He has a couple of games where he only had 2 or 3. So I think he's probably somewhere in between those wild swings.
Yeah, I see a couple of people on the stream. It looks like Segura. I know Segura was somewhat activated, but I don't think he'll play tonight. And the only reason why there would be anything considered a nugget from me, Travis, is just because I lucked out. We're talking about a team that I follow. So don't get used to nuggets coming from me. Get used to them coming from Alex. Is there anybody on the bottom end of the slate tonight? I mean, maybe we can work deep in here and go back off of projections as well, because we would anticipate that anybody who has a low number to them, if we go even to, right, Scooble, if we want to go to your Tigers here, just a lower number for a pitcher that you think could truly pay out simply because of the projections, Alex, or maybe just because of the low ownership, and this would be a contrarian play that you kind of like the deeper you mine?
Skubal, man, I'm frustrated because like his strikeout numbers were so good in the minor leagues, but then this year it's just been like really bad. So I don't have any confidence in him.
He's only 5,400.
I don't mind that, but there are some guys I think could be better spend downs. One that I'm looking at is Mike Fosnevich.
Yeah, I see him at 6,800. He's pretty good on your projections.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing here is he's got a good matchup today against Seattle, who they have a pretty bad lineup that strikes out a good amount. So this really isn't me loving Fulton-Evers, just loving the matchup and the price, because he does have a only 22% strikeout rate this year, so not a great arm. But that price and the matchup do look enticing.
So before we start looking a little deeper into the stacks, how much, I'm just curious, when you're looking at deeper end guys for P2s, especially on larger slates like tonight, Alex, how much do you then balance out not just their projections and their ownership and what you have for the pitcher himself, but also the stack ideally that he would be going up against? So maybe if you had, for example, now they're not in St. Louis, right? But if you had in that Rockies Cardinals game, if you had St. Louis as maybe a lower percent stack, maybe down to where the Mets or the D-backs are closer to the end of that, does that change your mind in playing a lesser P2 that may be able to have a decent or good night out of nowhere?
Yeah, I mean, the matchup does sometimes make bad pitchers look pretty good. So one guy I guess you could look at is Brad Keller. Going up against the White Sox. He's only 4,900, so that's the main appeal. But they are without some of their better hitters, especially after Luis Robert or Robert. I don't. Anyway, I think he's out for a few months, so I don't recommend that. But
fair enough.
I think that he's playable. Another guy I'm kind of intrigued by is Austin Gomber, who St. Louis is another team I think is worth targeting. Just a team that doesn't have a lot of talent right now. So they have some strikeouts. He's been, he's on the Rockies. So every time he pitches in Coors Field, that's going to drag his numbers down. So I think every time he's pitching out of Coors Field, maybe he'll go overlooked a little bit. Anyway, are there any nuggets you're trying to find at the bottom of this price range tonight?
For me?
Yeah.
No, I think that was it. I mean, I wanted to get, I didn't want to move to the stacks without mentioning the guy going for your squad tonight, right? In Snowball. So that was kind of my end around of bringing him up. That's nice. All.
Okay.
No, there wasn't really, I saw on the stream, Shoemaker was brought up, speaking of that game as well. But, really when you look at just guys who are real at the bottom, I don't know, Matt Harvey has a decent average and at 6,500, but really the only one of the last two starts to go over 20 fantasy points. I don't know if there's enough, if you can even expect Harvey in this game tonight to go into the sixth inning, and that would be a problem. It just seems like there's so much boom bust with a guy like that where it's probably not even worth it.
Probably, yeah. I mean, Harvey, he doesn't have good strikeout stuff these days, but he's had a couple of good moments. I remember he shut down the Yankees and everyone was really pissed because they all had the Yankees stack. One other game I feel like we got to mention is this Mets versus Diamondbacks game.
Yep.
New York is only about 55 to 60 degrees during this game. So very favorable to pitchers. And Gallen has been good this year with a 30% K rate. David Peterson may be one of those guys that's super low owned that could win a slate. He has a 29% K rate this year. A little bit of the matchup versus Arizona. They're not a good team, but they don't strike out, so I don't see it as moving the needle a ton. But Peterson, he's not really a prospect that's touted at all, but he's had really good strikeout stuff this year.
Well, I wonder if it's just worth it. And this kind of goes back to where we began to wrap up. kind of talking about the pitchers here, but I wonder if it's just worth it, right, to run the two pitchers with Rogers at 88 and now Gallen at 89. You've locked in two of your top three projections for tonight.
Definitely, yeah, and the ownership isn't bad either. Like Gallen's only 12% projected ownership, so I don't know what people don't like about him, because he's had a 30% strikeout rate this year so far. Been limiting runs pretty well too. So overall, pretty good pitcher.
Show today brought to you by No House Advantage. Continue to tell you about this cool and unique way, different spin, if you will, on DFS. They offer player prop contests. It's everything: NBA, MLB, NFL, PGA, even, all for cash prizes. And it's the exclusive peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform, making everything equal. Pardon me. No, equal, not evil. I apologize. It's the opposite of that. It's good. It's equaling the playing field, not evil. I don't think that's a term, so therefore I can't be accused of messing up. All right, so there's over 500. This is great because Terry put me onto this, where for somebody like myself who does a lot of player props when it comes to betting, like on apps, this is where I should be, Alex, is at No House Advantage, taking advantage of their DFS, because it's essentially the same thing, except things will lock in. So I don't have to worry about fluctuating depending on how many people take a certain player or take a certain side on that, like I would with a normal sports book. So just as a bettor, let alone a DFS player, No House Advantage has a crazy cool, unique way to win some money.
Definitely. I mean, I think you hit on some good points, and the competition there is just a lot easier to beat. So definitely a good place to be putting some money down. And also,
that's the key point right there.
Yeah.
I buried the lead. Shame on me.
One of the interesting things is in baseball, the way props work, usually a lot of these have odds on one side or the other. Like one I was really looking into is RBIs, because usually I think a lot more games than not, a guy gets 0 RBIs. So taking the under on just a bunch of batters getting RBIs sounds like a pretty good proposition. You see what I did there?
Nice. I love it. I love it. I did see what you did there. That's beautiful. Just use our promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, and you'll receive a $20 first match deposit today. Again, No House Advantage. We have some other things to tell you about that we're doing, including the Awesemo Hall of Fame, but we have to get into stacks. And let's start right at the top, right? The number one stacked option for you on the stack tool on awesemo.com is the LA Dodgers. And is there anything, is that it? Are we rolling with the Dodgers stack tonight?
Well, it looks like no one has the Dodgers.
Pretty low, I see 2.3
yeah.
on the ownership share, right, for DraftKings?
So I think the prices are just pretty high. So yeah, it's like the cheapest guy on the team is 4K. Like most of the good players are in the 5 to 6K range, which I don't understand like how they're priced up so much, but they're a great team and we can save a bunch of money at pitchers. So I think you can go to the Dodgers. Even though like if you're fantasy crunching, you might not be getting a ton of them, I think they're worth putting in.
And from that standpoint, I guess if you're building already with what we did with Rogers and Gallen, it's probably going to make it a little more difficult, right? Because we've pretty much spent so much on pitching.
Well, I've spent a lot more on pitching before than those two. So,
okay.
But I do feel like if you're trying to stack up the Dodgers, going to a cheaper guy like Fosnevich or Gomber could be the play.
Red Sox, we mentioned that as far as the ballpark they're playing in, and basically this game, true as well. First one on our slate that we talked about from a hitting standpoint as far as the ballpark. And I see Boston, part of me, much more owned than the Dodgers and the next couple of teams that will hit as far as high as you have on your slate. Is that a good indication that you could slide in maybe some affordable players in this stack?
So the first thing I'm thinking about with this Boston at Baltimore game is the weather, because I saw in chat people are saying like, I think this game might be
Yep.
Postponed until tomorrow. But
You know what? I think you're right.
well, the thing is, the weather apps are saying like the rain's going to stop around 7, which is game time. So the other counterpoint is this is the first game of the series. At least usually on Friday they are. So actually, on Dark Sky, which is one of the apps I like to look at, it has a much more bleak forecast for Baltimore today. So the takeaway here is you want to look closer to game time, what the forecast is saying, because right now it's not clear if this game is going to play or not.
Okay. It looks like both Gene Segura and Bryce Harper, by the way, are in the lineup for tonight. And that's a little bit of Segura, not as much because they activated him, but Harper, I'm a little surprised. I know he was able to take BP with the wrist yesterday, but I'm a little surprised he's in the lineup tonight. And just with that news, banking off of what we just said, which doesn't look like that game at the very least would start on top. Now your Phillies percentage for the stack is pretty low. And I wonder how much of that is based on just the unknown at the time, really, of injury. But now seeing a guy like Harper back in the lineup, even Segura, who can hit when healthy, does that change a Phillies stack that's probably going to be super low owned?
I'm not really sure, to be honest, because like I kind of go off the sportsbook numbers to some extent. I don't know if they thought Harper was going to play.
You're talking my
not.
language.
So fortunately, we got plenty of time to get new lines as they come out. But the Phillies lineup does look pretty good to me. The matchup is tough versus Morton, so it could be one where you take a chance that they can just get Morton out of the game in a few innings, and then you're facing much worse pitchers after that.
Yeah, well, how about that though? On the flip side, if we can just go back really quick, because Morton was a guy that when we were talking about pitchers you really liked with Harper out of the lineup. How much from playing a Morton standpoint does this change? Not the stack for the Phillies, but just Morton.
Yeah, I mean, I think Morton's still a good play. The main stat I'm looking at for teams when picking pitchers is their strikeout rate.
Got it.
And I do have the Phillies lineup today as being about average. And Morton's price is super low at 7,700 on Draftkings, 79 on Fanduel. So I think he's pretty intriguing regardless, but Harper being in the lineup definitely doesn't help.
No, I'd be interested to see. I see it at 7.5, depending on it, maybe even 8, where you can get it. But I'm interested to see if that total moves up, even if it's a half a run with this news. As you mentioned, we've got 4 hours just under before this thing locks in. Yeah. But I would be interested to see with this news if in fact that total moves just a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly could.
All right. So we mentioned a couple stacks right out there at the top of your projections, the Dodgers and the Red Sox being 1, 2. Is there and maybe it's right there at 3, I don't know, but was there one that you really super liked before we even started the show that you were just thrilled that where it was on the list where people could take advantage of?
The White Sox look like no one's playing them, and it doesn't make any sense to me because they're facing Brad Keller, who the price tag of 4,900 seems about right on him. I'll just put it that way. Just a guy that doesn't really strike anyone out. The weather in Kansas City is going to be in the mid 60s, so not the best weather, but I think the White Sox do have a few injured guys, but they still have some decent power. They have a team total of 5, which is strong, and no one's on them. So why not? Yeah,
that's one of the lowest, at least as far as projection, right? I mean, I see them at 2.4, their share. Well, we mentioned the Dodgers just because of the price, but it's different here, right? As far as the reason why you have such a low ownership share for the two teams.
Yeah, I mean, the White Sox are a lot cheaper than the Dodgers.
Much cheaper, yeah.
I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding why they're low owned, but hey, I don't need to understand why. I just have to play the team that's low owned, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, and everything that we do here is always on Odd Shopper. I continue to tell people, is somebody who does 2 to 3 sports betting shows a day in and out of Philadelphia, this is my go-to. This is my place. It's not just when we're doing shows here on Awesemo. This is work. This is prep now for me everywhere I go, because you know that you get the best odds already for you on oddshopper.awesemo.com. And I was looking at the total itself. It's pretty high at 8.5. So even the expectation from the books is that you're going to get some runs here. That maybe it's just the injury. Again, I don't want to continue to stare at something too long, that we should probably just take a gift, right, and keep going, not to look the gift horse in the mouth. But even the total is high, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, like, all the factors seem to be working for the White Sox today, including the ownership. So, hey, I don't mind picking some Chicago teams in my lineups here.
Is there a stack that you see, another high owned stack? And I'll give you 2 that I see that are super high owned in comparison to the rest, with Houston and Toronto. Is there one or maybe both that you would stay away from simply because of the ownership?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a stack that's really high owned, it's worth considering a fade, because as we see, Houston is the highest owned stack, but they only have the 5th highest percent chance of being a top stack tonight. And you really do need an outlier day when you stack a team for them to be in the winning lineup. So if we're looking at the stats here, they're going up against Ross Stripling, who not a great pitcher, so that's working in their favor. They got a good lineup today, so I think everything's looking good, but they are a home team, which is a knock against them. And it looks like they got a couple guys that are just really, really cheap, which is driving up the affordability of the stack. So I don't really get why everyone's on Houston today, unless they just think this matchup is really great, because they don't jump out that much more than the other teams.
Is it the same that you would apply with Toronto as well? I mean, I'm looking, it's only really a 1.1% less. It's one of the 3 teams. The other one we mentioned was the Red Sox, that have double-digit ownership percentage. So I don't know if it's simply the end will always justify the means, where you have a team even in Toronto at 10.8 that you stay away from.
Yeah, Toronto, it looks like they have some really cheap options today, which is going to drive up the ownership, particularly Teoscar Hernandez batting cleanup possibly. And then Rowdy Tellez, if he's in the lineup, he's 2,400, which is really low for a guy that has some home run pop. So on their face, they look good, but the ownership is really high. And any chance you get to bet against a team offense going off in baseball is usually a winning bet. So it just doesn't happen that much at the time in baseball, as we see a 5% top stack percentage for Toronto.
I mentioned that we have a couple of more things that we want to tell you about and continue to tell you about before we get out of here, and hit a couple of more stacks, of course, and some more big plays here from Alex before we wrap up another MLB deep dive. And one of them, of course, is the Awesemo Hall of Fame. And as somebody newer here to the Awesemo community, this is amazing to see. First off, the idea is fantastic, right? We want you to download the Awesemo profile. We want that to be your profile so that you can brag across the entire world about your huge winnings. So just go awesemo.com/avatar, use that as your pick wherever you're playing, and then tweet your wins at Awesemo HOF, and you can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And it's great, because every tournament, everything that I'm playing in, when I go check how bad I finish the next day, without a doubt, Alex, 2, 3, 4 of the top 5 all have the Awesemo. Everybody has the Awesemo avatar. And it's amazing to see that, because that's proof, right, that what we're doing is working. What you're doing is working.
Definitely. It's always great to see people in the community on top of these leaderboards. So congrats to all you guys that have had some big wins here.
Yeah, we keep updating the link, and we keep updating picks, and we want to make sure that you can see that it's not just us talking about it and suggesting that you go do that, but this is proof positive. And look, you'll see it out there as well. You all know it, especially when you win, because even when you win and you're going through this practice of tweeting out your gigantic victory, 5, 10, 50, 100, however much you win, you know that you just sweated out that tournament, or you sweated out whatever it was with 3 or 4 other Awesemo subscribers, because you see the pick at the end. So taking over the world, man, one subscriber at a time. I love it, Alex.
I like this one from No House Advantage that I saw today, where the guy finished first and second in their tournament last night. It's like, leave some money for someone else.
That's amazing. That it might be the best advertisement for both our people and No House Advantage as well, that you can do that. Let's look at this. I wanted to start kind of at the bottom again as we hit this final chunk of time that we have here on the deeper dive. And I wanted to look at Miami because of the matchup, and also just the low. And we're talking about bottom now. We're talking about the teams on the bottom and trying to find some sort of contrarian run here. Miami, Milwaukee, we know Yelich is out. They're struggling coming off that sweep to the Phillies. I wonder if this might be the time to kind of catch the Brewers and play a Miami stack.
Well, they're facing Brent Suter, so that is a good time to target them. But the over-under in this game is only 6.5, and it looks like no one has Miami today, which is a good enough reason to take a few shots. But them being the home team and having a team total of 3.7, Vegas is definitely telling us there are better options today.
Fair enough. Is there a better option for you that jumps out kind of in that bottom third stack, to where, again, the idea is taking advantage of circumstance, right? If it's the matchup, if it's the ballpark, even if it's the weather.
Going to cheap stacks in baseball isn't always a great strategy, but I do see the Angels stack is popping in our value, and they don't have very much ownership. So even Trout today, because they're facing Urias, and it looks like the sports books are giving Urias a lot of credit here, because the Angels only have a 4-run team total. So you can build a stack that's like Ohtani, Trout, and then 3 of the guys farther down the order, and it's super cheap. I don't mind taking some shots there.
All right, so let's get back kind of more to the middle chunk of it, right? We talked about the 3 heavy owned stacks, the Dodgers right there at the top, who are not owned really by anybody because they're so expensive. But when we start to get to that middle pack, or really the top middle pack, if you will, the Yankees, right, the Mariners, maybe even the Cards, if you throw in there, where are you looking at that, not middle, but like lower top tier stack to get ahead of the value?
I think there are a lot of good options today, but it does look like all right, so sometimes I find it easier to figure out which teams not to play. So
beautiful. That's a good process of elimination.
Yeah. So St. Louis and Washington look like they might be a little bit too cheap today, so they're looking a little overowned. A better option might be Cleveland.
And the Nats have a pretty decent ownership share, just under 7.
Yeah. Cleveland is looking kind of interesting, where they only have 4% ownership. They're matched up versus Wade Miley, who he's been good this year, but I don't have much confidence in Wade Miley's pitching skills despite that. And I know the pricing on Cleveland, it looks like they priced up some of the best plays, like Jose Ramirez is 5,600. So that's going to drive down the ownership, but I think you can make some Cleveland stacks work.
Cleveland stack. Okay. Yeah. Especially with price. So where did we draw that line? Cause you mentioned, and you gave out the one lone example, but for the most part, playing these low valued stacks, it's very high risk for a very low percentage reward, or at least the return of it coming through low percentage. So where are we drawing that line? I mean, again, you might be able to find, right, certain value depending on pricing. I get that from a circumstantial point, I guess, but really just drawing a line, because Atlanta, for example, right? We talked about the two pitchers earlier and how Morton is a strong example, and then really of a good play, right, for a strikeout pitcher. And then the whole factoring in of Segura and Harper on the Phillies lineup. But what about the opposite there with that Atlanta stack?
Yeah, to answer your first question, I think a good cutoff point is when a team has a projection of less than 4 runs. And I'm going off the run totals we have in our lineup builder, which are the ones I use. A lot of times when you see run totals out there, it's based on the over-under of the game. So like if this Arizona Mets game has an over-under of 7, so they're dishing out 7 runs to the two teams. But that's not actually mathematically right, because the median is a lot lower than the mean in baseball. So make sure to go to our lineup builder for the actual average runs you should expect. But the teams that have run totals under 4, this Milwaukee at Miami game, both of those teams, Arizona at the Mets as well, and Colorado facing Flaherty and San Francisco facing Snell. It's just like there's not enough potential in any of those spots to really waste your time on a 14-game slate. So if we break this down, there are 28 teams. That means the average team has about a let's see, what's 100 divided by 28? 3.5.
I didn't know I had to do math here like that on the fly.
So 3.5 is the average team's chance of being the top stack. So I'd say like if you're in that 2+, like at least that's like somewhere in the vicinity of average.
Okay, so looking at the lineup builder and going off that point that with 4, right, as the cutoff, how about a team that has 4 but going up against a team under 4, like the A's, for example? Now they're going to be low owned.
I think don't worry about the opposing team's run total. But yeah, I think the A's, let's see, they're going up against Rich Hill, and I like that because Rich Hill's stuff has gone down in quality the last 2 years significantly. So if you skipped baseball last year, like you might have missed Rich Hill kind of not having as good stuff. It does look like he's picked up his strikeouts this year a little bit. He's at 26%. So I guess he must be coming off a good outing here, because I remember he's really struggling to start the season. But okay, so the stats on this guy, he throws an 89-mile-an-hour fastball. So I guess that's not that down that much from his LA days. No. So maybe my intuition is throwing me off here, where I feel like Rich Hill should be good at a target now, but looks like he's picked up his game a little bit.
Now, 3-run shot on the streams. Houston bats kind of cheap for being Houston. Did we overlook the cost for Houston just because of the high ownership?
Let's see, Houston. Yeah, wow, these guys are really cheap on FanDuel, I'm seeing. So it looks like they're going to be pretty chalk on FanDuel. Yeah, on Draftkings they're pretty popular too. So one thing I'm seeing here is Yuli Gurriel and Carlos Correa are both priced up today and drawing very little ownership. So if you throw one of those two guys in your lineup, you're going to be kind of different than the other Houston stacks. So I think that could be a good move.
Nice. Yeah, I was looking at and just seeing price-wise, knowing the ownership was the bigger deterrent. So back kind of in that middle as we, wind down, final couple of minutes here, and then we'll continue to look for any last-minute questions on the chat that you want to throw out to Alex. I just want to make sure that from that, again, that top bottom part of me of the top tier, right to where we get to that second tier. We mentioned the A's, right? As far as stacks are concerned, the Yankees, looking at their value, their stack percentage about 5.4. So you have them pretty high. Their ownership about 8.5. So it's a little higher as far as where we have on the list. And then you go back to the run projection, right?
Yeah, I think the Yankees look solid. I mean, facing Corbin, who is a lefty, which does confer an advantage in Yankee Stadium. But the more important thing is he just hasn't been good this year. 8 ERA so far, almost 5 last year. So I do feel like the Yankees look solid today.
Twins at right. I mean, I see the run projection here on your lineup builder at 5.1, going up against your guy in Scooble. might be an opportunity here, right? To sneak in.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because like on DraftKings, these guys are priced up a ton, which is going to drive down the ownership, but this is one of the better spots in the slate. So I think you can pay up for the Twins today.
All right. So we gave you the top 2 pitchers here, right? From Zach Gallen and Trevor Rogers. That's where we built with Alex, their top 2, P1 and P2. What are your top, just to everybody here as we wind down, just going back, maybe their top 2 or even 3 stacks that you like? Doesn't even need to be right there at the top of your stack tool, maybe even a third team that we mentioned that is a little more of a subtle choice, if you will.
I think the White Sox really are standing out to me because they got a good team total and really low ownership today. So they're one. I think I see no reason to avoid facing Brad Keller. From there it becomes a little tricky. I'd say the Dodgers look appealing from a game theory standpoint, but they're very expensive today. I like that because I feel like there's some cheap pitchers that are actually good today. So I don't mind spending down a pitcher to be able to fit them in.
That total's at 9. Do you like it going over?
I haven't dug into it a ton, but
come on, let's parlay over 9 for the Twins Tigers game, under 7.5. That's where the best value is, at least on Odd Shopper, for the Phillies Braves game. What do you think? That good way to end? No, everybody makes money.
Maybe we'll double down from our DFS lineups in the sports book.
There you go. Do you do that a lot? I mean, you're so successful in the DFS world. Does that transfer over as much? I should be hitting you up for betting stuff as well now.
Well, I think it transfers over really well to the markets where you're betting stats. So like strikeout props are one that I really like to bet on sportsbooks. And I think you might see some projections for over-unders and money lines soon enough.
Awesome. Excellent. Make sure you follow Alex again on Twitter if you're not already. And of course you are, at Awesemo DFS, at Shander Show for me. Thank you to everybody here participating, watching, being a part of another program, the MLB Deeper Dive here on Awesemo.com. Thanks, Chris, producing the show. And you have a jam-packed night. And now, after today, zero excuse not to win some money listening to Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Thank you to everybody riding out. Best of luck. Win some money. Continue to stay here. Subscribe, like, share everything that you see. You don't want to miss anything that we're doing here. The Awesemo Plus package, again, for us today, the MLB player rankings are free tool for you. $29.95 weekly. You cannot beat that. For Alex, Chris, I'm Eytan. Thanks for watching. Good luck.